Welcome to the Success Talk Show, the podcast for ambitious leaders who want to get their best results and create a workplace for their teams to thrive. Each week, we share practical advice to help you accelerate your success and grow as an inspiring leader. Now, here's your host, Leadership Success Coach, Donna Siriani.
Welcome to another episode of the Success Talk Show. This is Donna Siriani, Leadership Success Coach and founder of Success Compass Academy. If you're listening for the first time, I'd like to take a minute to introduce myself. I've spent my entire career in technology, starting off as a programmer right out of college, working my way up to senior leadership roles in technology organizations, managing teams across the US, Europe, and Asia. After 35 years in technology, I left corporate roles behind to become a full-time coach and consultant. So now I help leaders accelerate growth, both for themselves personally and for their organizations, while creating a workplace for their teams to thrive. And on this episode, I'm going to share with you how to be true to yourself by defining your own rules of engagement. Now, before I dig into that, I just want to ask you a question. How are you feeling right now about your work situation, about your role? Now, when I ask that question of prospects and clients and colleagues, what I often hear, and see if this resonates with you, is that maybe you're really not as happy as you'd like to be, but you can't put your finger on why or what to change or what to do differently. You may want to feel passionate and energized about what you're doing. You want to have a clear vision of your goals and why you want them. You want to be able to set priorities, be true to yourself, and not force yourself into a position that wouldn't be right for you. Maybe you want to really be more disciplined about where you spend your time, and you want to be clear on your professional values. So if any of that resonates, then this concept of defining your own rules of engagement is a great next step. Now, one of the things that I love about this is that you can do this on your own starting today, defining a set of professional values that will serve as your rules of engagement. And when you think about it, your professional values, those are those deeply held values that really fuel your energy. And it's what drives your purpose in the work that you do. And what I love and have really thought of for so many years is that in the workplace, that is the best forum where you can express those values. And so if you think about your professional values as non-negotiable, that's why I say rules of engagement, then you can really decide for yourself what is so strong for you that you simply can't settle for less. When you do, you're just not as satisfied, fulfilled. You don't feel passionate or energized. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of stories to illustrate this, and then I'll give you a couple of simple steps that you can start today to define your values. And you may already have a set of values, but what I have found most often is that even when I work with clients to help them clarify their values, we talk about how they can use those to guide their choices and their behavior, they still can always really appreciate a refresher. But, in the first scenario, let's say you want to feel passionate and energized about what you're doing. So if you have a set of values, you can decide how satisfied you are that those are being fulfilled today. So let's say you have 5 professional values. Those could be things like trust, respect, creativity, innovation, learning, growth, teamwork, collaboration, diversity, whatever it is. On a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you that that value is actually being met? Okay, and when it isn't, something, you can't quite put your finger on it, but something is missing. Okay, so that's really where we start with on the values. So just to tell you a quick story, I recently had a client who was not feeling very happy with her work. She actually loved what she did on a day-to-day basis, and she loved the contribution she was making, but she just didn't feel that passion or energy the way she had in the past, and she just wasn't sure what was going wrong or what to do differently, and it was really affecting her stress level, her mood. She just wasn't feeling great about things. When we took a closer look at her professional values, it became clear that her number one value of integrity wasn't being completely satisfied. There were some things in her workplace that were happening, and she just was feeling a little disappointed and recognized that maybe she wasn't going to stay at that company for much longer because she just wasn't happy with some things that were going on. Now, just coming to that realization was a really significant insight for her. Okay. So for you, if you want to feel passionate and energized about what you're doing, it could also be, just got to think about this. Do you look forward to going to work in the morning? Do you enjoy what you're doing on a day-to-day basis? Are you using your talents, your gifts? Do you actually like the work that you're responsible for? That's really the beginning. And if that is yes, then really look to your professional values to give you that sense of purpose, that there's alignment with what's really most important to you. For you to be true to yourself, you want to have these rules of engagement, or I'll just say your professional values, to guide you. And when those are being compromised, you're going to feel like something's not right. Can't put my finger on it, and maybe you will be able to, but at all times, these serve as a red flag. So let's say, for example, something happened in the workplace and you're really angry, really frustrated, you're feeling a lot of emotion. Chances are that is a clue that one of your values is being compromised. And look at what happened. And what could the value be that situation is really violating? Okay, that's a clue. Conversely, let's say you're feeling really passionate and energized. Things are going great. Something really good just happened. Something you're really proud of. Okay, what was it? And what could be the value that it's honoring, that it's fulfilling? Because it could be something that's really provoking a strong emotion. Could be positive or negative, but that is a clue to look closer and see what's the underlying value. Now, if you're feeling like you want to be more disciplined about where you spend your time, again, your own rules of engagement, your set of professional values could give you some guidance, point you in a direction. So I'll give you an example. I have a client who's a senior technology leader who thrives on researching and implementing cutting-edge technology. One of his core values is innovation, and another is continuous learning and growth. So when it comes to prioritizing where he spends his discretionary time, now obviously if he's got a deadline, he's got something's commitment, of course he's going to meet those commitments. But when it comes to that discretionary time of where he's going to put his effort and his focus, those two values are a guiding light for him. Now, I always say that your values are part of your success compass. And in the last podcast episode number 46, I talked to you about strengths and how important that is as the first element, if you will, of your success compass. And having a set of values, clearly defined professional values, is the second set of elements or coordinates on your compass that will guide you in a direction. Now, if you have a desire to be more disciplined about where you spend your time, then really identifying those top 5 professional values can help you. And like my client, he knows that when he's got a little chunk of time, he can plan what he really wants to spend it on. He knows exactly what it's going to be. He knows what his priorities are because his values are crystal clear. Okay. Now, in another case, I have another client who, if you want to be able to set priorities, it's not so much where you're spending your time, it's to be clear in your priorities, what's most important, second, third, and so on, but always be able to really clearly distinguish your priorities on a daily, weekly, monthly basis of what you really need to tackle. So I had another client whose values really served as an excellent guide to guide her choices, and her values were Number 1 was excellence and quality. Number 2 was professionalism, 3 was teamwork, 4 was efficiency, and 5 was autonomy. So if you just take her first value, professional value of excellence and quality, she would make it a priority that everything she produced for her organization, she made sure that it was outstanding quality and that she was really proud of everything that she contributed. She was a senior leader, and so she was also setting a good example for her team. So that's an example of where having a clear set of values can help you with your priorities. Okay. Now, if instead you're feeling like, well, that all sounds good, but my real concern is I want to be true to myself, and I don't want to force myself into a job or a role or a position that really isn't the right fit for me. And if that's what you're thinking, again, your values, if you have a clear set of professional values, they can be a crucial element for making those decisions. Now, just to tell you a quick story, I had a client a few years ago who her number 1 value was to have a voice at the table. Now, you might say, well, that's not really a value. It's not like trust, respect, accountability, responsibility, but these are your values. So you get to decide the language, right? It can be a word, a phrase. You can make it up. You're the only person who has to know what it means. It just has to have significance to you. Okay. So her number 1 was have a voice at the table. When she went to her next employer, as a senior leader, she wanted to make sure that in that environment, in that particular role, she was going to be at the table helping to drive strategy. And she was able, because of her values, with that being number 1, she was able to say yes or no to possible jobs. So for example, there was a job that she was pretty interested in. It was a very rare opportunity to go work for a company she really admired. She was very excited to get the interview. But then once she went on the interview and started talking to people who work there, she realized and came to understand that it was a very hierarchical organization. And when they made decisions about strategy, it was behind closed doors, very few people, and it was not a collaborative environment. So had she pursued that role, she was not going to have a voice at the table. She would have to go into the company knowing that she was sacrificing her number 1 core value before she even started. So based on that, she was able to make the right choice for her and not pursue it. The good news is she did go to another organization, which was absolutely a perfect fit. So you can use your professional values as your own rules of engagement to make those kinds of big decisions. Now, you can take that a step further, not just the job, but when you're evaluating a workplace to see if that's really the company you want to work for, you can find out what are their values. Right? What are their workplace or their company values? And how do they align with your own values, your own professional values? Is there alignment? Now, if there's a disconnect, it may be, and you also want to find out, do they really use the values to guide behavior, make decisions, and shape the company, right? And shape the culture? Or is it just in name only? Do they have a set of values for their website, but nobody really refers to them? That's not part of their everyday life. You really do need to find that out through your contacts and through your interviews. Now, I have, just to tell you a story from myself, I had the opportunity to work as a consultant for a CEO, and he had learning as one of his core values, and he wanted to design a company culture around a set of values that were employee driven, but also he wanted it to be a learning culture. Well, since that's one of my top values, I was very excited. I saw it as a perfect fit, and I took the role to become Chief People Officer working for him. I was very, very excited because we were always aligned on a set of values, and that was extremely important. Now, for you, let's say you've got learning. Maybe you share that. Maybe you have learning as one of your core values. Well, when you're looking around at your current company or a future company you're thinking of working for, what do they do to foster that, right? Is that something that they themselves invest in their employees, invest in their leaders? They have leadership development programs. Do they provide coaching? What are they doing to walk the talk? All right. So again, you come up with your set of professional values. Those can become your rules of engagement. And when you act in alignment with those, it's going to define your own behavior. So let's say professionalism is one of your core professional values. Okay, once you define your set of values, you need to make sure that you are operating in alignment with your own rules of engagement, right? Your behavior. When you're having a tough conversation, managing conflict, dealing with behavioral issues in the workplace, are you holding yourself to that standard of that set of values? Are you a role model for those values? So if, professionalism is one of your top values, but you're actually not treating people with trust and respect and professionalism, and people would be surprised to find that's one of your values, then, really you need to start with yourself, right? But let's say it is. Let's say teamwork is one of your values, and you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. You want to be true to yourself first, and then also when you find that any of these values are not measuring up, you're not really that satisfied with, how well they're being fulfilled, you can ask yourself, what can I do? So let's take teamwork as an example. Let's say that's one of your values. And what I want you to do for all of your top 5 values is score them on a scale of 1 to 10. How satisfied are you today that those are being fulfilled? And okay, let's take teamwork. And let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, you give it a 5. Okay, so then what could you do to move the needle and increase that score? What would a 10 look like? All right, well, what would a 6 or a 7 or an 8 look like? Like, what could you do to improve teamwork in your work environment so that the scores are increasing? What is it you have control over? What could you initiate? Right? And this could be true regardless of whether you're looking at integrity, autonomy, creativity, innovation, learning and growth, trust. It doesn't matter what the values are. Once you score them, you need to start with yourself. Are you acting in alignment with them? And how satisfied are you that those values are being met? And what can you do to improve them, right? What actions can you take? I had a client who, thinking about, getting a job and making sure it's a good fit, she had work-life balance as one of her values. And she was going through the interview process. She was able to ask a lot of questions to see if her future employers, which ones actually had flexible schedules, how many people, occasionally worked from home, was that an option? She was able to find that out. So she was able to either negotiate that, or she did go to a place where she was able to work from home. So it ended up working out beautifully because she had that level of awareness. Now, it does help when you go through an interview process because you can form your questions, right? When you're going to interview perhaps with several people, you can develop interview questions. When it's your turn to ask questions of them, you can ask questions that try to uncover what values are going to be fulfilled. So for example, if, as I said, learning culture, I gave that example already of, all right, what learning programs do they have available, right? What do they do to invest in their leaders and in their employees? Work-life balance, right? What do typical work schedules look like? How do they handle when the team has, more responsibilities, a greater workload than they have resources? How do they handle that? What does that typically look like? So, you're trying to think of like the best ways to ask those questions, right? So you get as much data as you can before you take the job. Now, in all cases, all of these stories that I'm sharing with you, all of these stories were about how you establish your own rules of engagement to be true to yourself. Now, one of the things I read recently, which I absolutely loved, it was a book by Brené Brown called Rising Strong. Like, in the face of failure, how do we respond? How do we get back up again? And what I loved about what she wrote is she said, our biggest regret is when we ask ourselves, were we all in and were we true to ourselves? And just to quote her for a second, she wrote, regret is what taught me that living outside of my values is not tenable for me. She says, when you're rumbling with failure and it's clear that the choices you made along the way were not in alignment with your values, you have to grapple not only with the fallout of failing, but also with a feeling that you betrayed yourself. And I absolutely love that. So if you find yourself in a conflict, a difficult situation, and you refer to your values and say, how do I need to handle this situation so that I'm in integrity with my own values, so that when I look back on this, I will feel that I was brave and courageous and in alignment, and I was true to myself. And I'll never regret that, if whatever that takes in terms of discipline, courage, bravery, to really act in alignment with what's most important to you. So, just to kind of conclude and wrap up, because I wanted to give you some stories to share with you how really the impact that this can have for you to have, your own set of values. And what you can do is brainstorm a list of things that are on your mind after you listen to this episode. It could be, 10 or 15, 20, just write whatever comes to your mind. But then through process of elimination, narrow it down to no more than 5 or 8. I actually recommend 5, but you could go as high as 8. If you have too many, then it becomes an ineffective list. So get it down to 5 to 8 values, preferably rank order them. What's number 1, what's number 2, and so on. After you get that list, and remember, the words only need to have meaning to you. After you have that list, score each one on a scale of 1 to 10. How satisfied are you that each value is being fulfilled today? So if learning is one of your top 5 values and you don't really feel like you've been learning much lately, maybe you give it like a 1 or a 2. But if instead you're in lots of, programs and taking courses, you may say, wow, that's being met. It gets a 10, but score each value. Now, if you struggle a little bit, you say, I'm really not sure how to get clear on my values, then here's a couple of tips. Think about recently situations where you've been annoyed, frustrated, angry, disappointed, some strong emotion. What was it about? And what could possibly be the value underneath the situation that was being violated? If somebody, a colleague went behind your back, did something that really made you angry, maybe trust was at the core of it. So just think about what that points to. Conversely, it could be a positive emotion. Think about in the last 6 months, something you've been really proud of or that has really made you happy, feel really satisfied, really engaged or passionate or energized. What was it? Because again, that could point to one or more values, okay? Now, once you do that, I really encourage you to keep those values somewhere that they're visible. Put them on your phone, on your desktop, in your planner, and then you can ask yourself, really revisit them, have it be in a place where you're going to see them often. Whenever you get into or you're about to go into a difficult or challenging situation, look at your values and ask yourself, what do you need to do so that you're living within those values, right? That you're in integrity with them. Remember, I said a minute ago about Brené Brown, you don't want to have the regret that you weren't acting in alignment with your own values, right? It was within your control. And as far as your success compass, having a set of values is part of that, because what you're good at, your strengths, which are those gifts, the talents, the things that you're really good at, plus your values. And in a future episode, we're going to talk about your passions, your vision, your goals. We've got more to cover, but this is really the second most critical component to add to your success compass, because it's really going to guide you and point you in a direction. Priorities, vision, goals, feeling passionate, energized, being able to know where to focus your attention. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful for you. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode, I would love to have you leave a rating and a review for the podcast in iTunes. And if you'd like to get a copy of the PDF that has the 5 steps I'm going to be going through on this podcast, which includes the values, go to my website, donnasboardroom.com, and on the homepage, you'll see the download. And these steps will really be showing you, for my Acclimate to Accelerate program, the 5 major components to accelerate your success. Anyway, with your success in mind, I wish you all the best and have a great day.